So continuing from exactly where we left off. Apologies if you see that you probably have noticed that my browser has changed. I was having a few problems with Chrome, so I switched to Safari. Alright, so back to where we started. So now, this is exactly what we had when we left off. I want to show you another way to make the sprites appear instead of doing the mathematics with the x position and what the x position is equal to. So another way to do or achieve the same result, what you could do is you could create a clone after an interval. So you could repetitively create a clone after a certain interval. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into controls and take out another repeat until. So it's repetitively creating a clone, and I'm putting it inside that part right there, right? Our top part, right under the create clone of pipe. Now if you see I click the start button, it's just going to create so many pipes all at the same time. And that's not what we want. What we want is we want to create it after a certain amount of time. So the way to achieve that is over here in the controls, you see there's a wait timer. So you're going to create a clone, let's say wait for 4 seconds, and then you're going to create another one. Let me just clean this up again, okay, so it looks nicer. All right, and let me show you how it looks now. So you wait for 1, 2, 3, 4, and it'll create another clone. And you can see it gets a little bit mashed up, and that's because we still have this if check right over here. So it's creating a new clone every 4 seconds, but it's also creating a new clone every time x is equal to 100 of any of those clones. If we take this out, we pretty much solve the issue. And now we have a clone every 4 seconds, right? So this gives us a different way to control the speed of our pipes. Like if you want, if you'd like to, for example, if you'd like to make the pipes closer together, you can make this timing slower, less than 4 seconds. If you'd like them further apart, you'd make them more than 4 seconds. So like, I played around with these numbers, and so can you. I find the 3.6 to be quite a good time, and it gives us quite evenly spaced out pipes. Maybe even less than 3.6. Maybe we can make it 3.5 or 3.4. Make the game a little bit more challenging. All right. So there you have it. There you have it. So that would be another way to do it. Let me move this down here. It doesn't really matter how you place these, but I'm not going to change these because there are certain things that we can do. So as you notice right now, the pipes, they're getting stuck at the end of at the end of our grid. So what we can do is we can have a check system in place. So we can use this if like before and put it inside our repeat until. Right? But instead of this x position is equal to, right? Because we don't want to have to check a specific number all the time. If we say when the x position is anything more than negative 240, then these clones, we can get rid of them. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to pull this one out and go back to operator, and instead of making equals to, we're just going to make it anything greater than, right? If x position is anything greater than. So if, sorry, and you have to be a little bit careful here because it's not actually greater than. It's if the x position is less than, right? Because a negative number, it has to be less than, right? Because over here, x is negative 240, right? Around 240. If I can get my arrow right. It's around negative 240. So we have to say if x position is less than negative 240, and we're going to take this x position, so we're reusing parts, right? If x position is less than negative 240, then no, we don't want to create a pipe. Let's get rid of this. Right click and delete. Let's get rid of this one as well. Right click and delete. What we want to do is we want to delete the pipe. So we're going to go back into controls, and you see you have something here called delete clone. So we're going to take this delete clone, and I'm going to put it in there. All right? So let's see what happens now. Let's start the game again. Excuse me for the lag. Okay. So now, as you can see, all right, every 3.4 seconds a new pipe is created, okay, which is what I wanted. And as it reaches the end of the screen, it disappears. All right. So that's it. We've completed what we need to do with our pipes. And just to make the pipes a little bit closer to each other, I'm going to make this a little smaller. I made it 3.1. I think they're still too far apart. And to me, that looks much better. So we're done with the pipes. We have to fill in these, recall, we have to fill in these repeat positions, repeat untils. We have to give them stop conditions. We have to give them a point where all these pipes stop moving. But we'll learn to deal with that in a later point of this game. What I want to do now is just right-click on the ground, and I want to show the ground. Okay, and with the ground, just like with the pipes, you can position them. If I click on the ground, I can position them using my when the game starts, I can give them a go to XY position, and I think that is what I will do. Go to XY. You can also, what you can do is you can just drag the ground into position, but I'm going to give it a XY position. Okay, so the X coordinate should be something like 0, and the Y coordinate will be something like around over here, which is around, you can see it's about Y equals negative 151. Let's say I make it Y equals negative 160, just to see what it looks like. Press start. Boom. Oh, there you go. It's perfect. All right. There's my ground. Okay. So I'm going to right click, clean up, just so it looks a bit nicer. And we're done with the pipe. We're done with the ground. Now we just need to focus on the bird. Let's right click and show the bird. And just like we did with the pipes and the ground, we're going to start off by going back into events and pulling out the when green flag is clicked. All right. So as you can tell, the pipes is probably one of the more complicated parts of this entire game. All right. So now we're saying, okay, when green flag is clicked, what I want to do is just like I did with the bird, the pipes and the ground, I want to give it an XY position to go to. So just in case the user moves it around, every time the game restarts, it will move to a certain location. So the trick with this game is actually very interesting. It's the fact that the bird doesn't actually move. Well, it does. The bird only moves up and down, and the pipes only move from right to left. And that gives it the effect that the bird is actually moving forward, but in reality it isn't. Okay, so the simplicity of this bird is we only have to let it move up and down. That's the only programming we need to do for this bird. So as you can see, this bird, like this position where x is equal to, where x is equal to about negative 100 and y is equal to about 10 is a good place for the bird to start. So that's what I'm going to start off at. So x is equal to negative 100 and y is equal to about 10. Okay. If I press start, you see, okay, my bird is starting from a good place. Actually, I think I'll make it a little bit less than negative 100. Maybe I'll make it like negative 60. All right, start. And maybe I'll make it a little bit higher as well. So I'll make it something like 30. All right, that's good. That's where I want my bird to start. So just like the pipes are moving from one part of the screen to the other, from the right side of the screen to the left side, without the user having to do anything. In this game, in the FlappyBird game, if the user does nothing, the bird should constantly be falling, right? The bird should constantly be falling. And remember, like the pipes, motion is controlled like in loops, right? So we're just going to take another recursion loop out, repeat until, just like before. And in this case, in this time for the bird, unlike for the pipes, we're not going to change the Y position. We're going to go back into motion, and we're not going to change the X position, we're going to change the Y position. So if the user does nothing, the Y position of the bird should constantly change. So let's say, right now, see it's going up, because that's a positive number. We have to make it go down, so we have to make this a negative number. All right? So if we made it something like negative 3, press start, and you see the bird just falls down to the ground. Right? Right? I'm pressing start again and again and again, so I highlight my point. All right. One thing you'll notice is that the bird continues moving on beyond the ground, and it goes all the way to the bottom. So inside this repeat loop, let's create a check. Let's say when the bird touches the ground, it should stop moving. right? It should just stop moving. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go into our control, create an if-then loop, right? And we need to know the time when the bird is touching the ground. And when the bird touches the ground, that's what we call a pixel collision. When one sprite, the pixels of one sprite, touches another sprite, it's called a pixel collision. And Scratch has a nice way for you to detect that built in. You can just go into sensing, and you can, inside sensing, you can just pull out this touching operator, putting it inside the if, and say, okay, if the bird touching the ground, right, if the bird is touching the ground, then we can stop, all right? And over here, we can say something like stop this code, or stop, okay, so the bird's touched the ground, now do nothing. Or the simpler way to do it would be just to take this touching and let this loop stop when the bird is touching the ground. So it will no longer change y by anything because the bird just touched the ground, right? So let's do this again. Let's try it out, all right? And see, when it touches the ground, my loop, this loop, it stops itself. So it no longer continues onwards and onwards and onwards and onwards. So this is an easy way to fix it, right? Okay, so now we need to give the bird the ability to fly up, okay? And this game is very simple. We're only going to let the bird move up every time we press spacebar. So when I hit the spacebar key, I want my bird to fly up, all right? So I'm going to go into controls, into events, and I'm going to pull this out. It says when space key pressed. Okay, so you don't always have to work with the space key, right? You can work with any key you want, all right? But for this game, we are going to use the space key. So when the space key is pressed, this creates an event to the computer, and then the computer can react to that event. What we want to do is go to motion, and when the space key is pressed, we're going to change y by a positive number, because normally it's falling by a negative number, okay? But when I press the space key, it should change by a positive number, which is greater than that negative number, okay? So now look what happens when I press my start button, okay? Every time I press space, it goes up, it goes up, it goes up, but it goes up so little, right? It goes up so little that it doesn't really make a difference. So what I want to do is I want to make this number really huge, something like 30, all right? Press start again, and now you see, but now we still have a big issue. Majority of our game is actually complete, but the bird, it's just not smooth. It just doesn't go up smoothly, right? It just does not go up smoothly. It goes up very rigidly, and it comes down even more horribly than it goes up, okay? So let's fix that. Let's fix that. And to fix that, what we need is we need a data type. So right now over here we have a number. We're changing y by a number, a negative number, right? So what I'm going to do is instead of changing it by a number, I'm going to change it by making a variable. I went into data, I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call this speed. Or you can call it something like gravity, okay? You can call it anything you want, okay? Let's call it gravity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this gravity. This gravity is a data type. It's a normal data type, like we did in our. Okay, so this gravity is a data type, all right? And just for consultation, let's look at our PowerPoint one more time. So data types are the objects, or variables needed to create an application, okay? They're needed to hold data, okay? They need to be used to hold data, all right? So data can be in most programming languages, an integer, a float, or a character. So an integer is a number, positive or only positive. A float is a decimal point number, and a char is a character, so it's a word, all right? So in this case, when we made a variable here called gravity, this is a data type, okay? This is one type of data. And with Scratch, we're just introducing you to variables and something that can hold data. Just focus on the fact that this is something that will hold a value. It can be a number, or it can be a letter, or it can be numbers, or it can be letters, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take this gravity, this variable, or this data type, and drop it in here. So right now I'm saying until the bird is touching the ground, right? Until my bird touches the ground is what I'm saying here. Until my bird touches the ground, let the bird change the value of y of the bird by this value gravity. If I press start now, you notice the bird doesn't go down anymore. And that's because we never gave this gravity a value. All right? So every time the game starts, whenever the game starts, let's give gravity a value. Let's give it a value of -3 like we had before. Okay? If we press start, you see it falls down now because gravity now has a value. And to make the whole issue that we had before of the bird going up much, much smoother than it was before, what we can do is, instead of changing it by a number, right? Instead of changing by a number, let's just forget about this part even exists. Change y by something. Let's just get rid of it entirely. And what we want to do is we want to let's change the gravity so it can move up. It can move in the opposite direction. So what I can do is I can just, over here, every time I press the space key, I can just change gravity. I can change it by something like, instead of -3, I can make it +7. So if I press start now, you see what happens is, or my bird's falling. If I press spacebar, it goes all the way up, right? So what I want it to do is I don't want it to go all the way up. I want it to go up for a small amount of time, and then I want it to fall back down again. So what I'm going to do is put in a wait sequence. Okay, and you should become familiar with this wait sequence now because we use this wait sequence to recreate our pipes, right? So I'm going to wait for, sorry, not 1.8 seconds, but 0.18 seconds. I played around with these numbers, and I found this number to work pretty well, all right? And after that wait, what I have to do is I have to set my gravity back to -3 again, so it doesn't keep going upwards, but it starts moving down again, all right? So if I press start now, okay, it's falling down. If I press up, see it moves up much, much, much more smoothly. It moves up for a small amount of time, and then it falls back down again. And that is exactly what I want. All right? That is exactly what I want. This is predominantly most of my game finished right here. All right, now we have small issues that we need to fill up. All right, we need to solve. So when the bird hits the pipe, it does nothing. Okay, so that's the first issue we need to deal with. And when the bird touches the ground, I can still press. All right, when the bird touches the ground, I can't do anything. But the pipes are still moving. So I need to solve that issue. So let's solve each issue at a time. Okay? So, for example, all right, for instance, let's think about this. All right? The bird is falling all the time. If we think about the pipe, these pipes need a stop sequence. And they need to stop when the bird touches the ground. Right? That's when they need to stop moving. When the bird touches the ground or when the bird is dead. So, let's make a new variable and let's call it bird alive. All right? I made a new variable and I called it bird alive. So I said, remember, these variables, they can hold a bunch of data. They can hold any type of data. They can hold numbers, they can hold letters, they can hold words. They can also, one other type of data that they can hold is a true-false data. So what I can do is I can take this set, all right, I'm going to bring it out to the top here. So when the game starts, I'm going to set the bird alive to be true. Okay? So when the game is started, the bird alive is true. And when this loop ends, what we can do is we can set the bird alive to be false. Okay? And there's another time where the bird alive is false, and that is when the bird hits the pipe. So for that, we need to create a check. We need to create a condition. So we go back into controls and pull out this if statement here. Okay? And remember, this if statement needs to check inside this loop all the time. All right? And then we need to check, all right? So we need to check, all right, so if the bird, okay, is touching, so when I went into sensing and I said is touching the pipe, all right? But there's actually two ways for the bird to die. The first way it can die is it can touch the pipe. The second way that it can die is it could touch the ground. So what we can do is I want to show you these operators, and this is very simple, just like English. It could touch the pipe, or it could touch the ground. Let's pull one of these out. Okay? So the first touching will be pipe. Go back into sensing, pull out another touching, and the second touching will be ground. So what I'm saying is if the bird is touching the pipe or it's touching the ground, then I'm going to take this bird alive, this variable that I created, and I'm going to make it false. All right? All right. So, okay. Now, let's come back to this pipe. Okay. What we can do is we can repeat this loop until bird alive is false. So let the pipes keep moving from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. But when the bird alive is equal to false, then we stop moving the pipes. So we stop this loop. So let's create that condition right now. If we go into operators, okay, you'll see that there is something that says this equals something equals something. Pull out this block and put it inside repeat until. All right. So you're going to say repeat until, now go to your data and pull out bird alive, put it into the first one. Okay, repeat until bird alive equals false. Okay, there you go. There you go. Now, I can duplicate this, the exact same thing, and this loop can also repeat until bird alive equals false. Let's try the game. Okay, so now, as I fly around, right, I'm having a lot of fun flying around. As you can see over here at the top, my bird alive is true, and if I hit the pipe, my bird alive becomes false, and all my pipes stop moving, which is fantastic. But let's look at some of the other problems we have, all right? So as I go about my game, as long as I hit this, you can see my bird alive is false, but I'm still pressing spacebar, and my bird is still flying. The bird is still going up. I can still press spacebar, and the bird is still going up. Okay? So let's go back into the code, into the script for the birds. This space key is quite important, but this space key should only allow the gravity to change if the bird alive is true, right? And just like you speak English, this is exactly how you would structure this. You'd take out an if statement, and before you do anything when the space key is clicked, you want to check, is the bird alive equal to true? Go back into operators, take out this equals factor, right? Go back into data, take out the bird alive, right? And over here, type in true. So if the bird alive is equal to true, then we can change the gravity and let it go up. If the bird alive isn't, then we do nothing. All right? So let's see what's going on here. All right, I'm pressing spacebar. I've died. Now I can press spacebar all I want. My bird will still fall to the ground. All right? That's fantastic. All right, great. One more thing that I want to do to make this game even better is if my bird dies, I want him to turn around and face the ground. So if the bird has touched the pipe or it has touched the ground, what I want to do is I want to go into motion and I want it to pull out a point in direction. And I want to pull that and say point down. Okay? But, all right, let's play and see what's going on. So my bird's flying around, my bird's flying around. See, now it's pointing downwards, which is exactly what I want. The issue with this is, now when I start the game again, now it's just pointing downwards all the time, and I don't want it to do that. So what I want it to do is, at the start of the game, I want to pull out another point in direction, right here, right? And I want to say point in direction right. So every time the game starts, you know, it will point in the correct direction, but every time the bird dies, it'll point towards the ground. All right, let's check this out now. Oh, there you go. Okay? But when I restart the game, we're good again. Okay? So, we've come a long way. We're almost finished with the entire game. We've almost finished with the entire game. All right. What we need to do now is we just need to think of a few ways to clean this game up a little bit. We need to give it scoring. We need to find ways to make a high score, all right? And we also want to give it some nice effects so it looks a little bit nicer. So what we could do is, for example, all right, so let's say every time the space key is clicked, what we could do is if you look at the bird, I also gave the bird lots of costumes, right? I gave him lots of costumes. You see that, okay, the costume that it starts off with is this one, right? But there are different costumes that it could have. So it could have different costumes and you can do different things with the costumes. So if this is the bird normally, every time you click spacebar, maybe it should do this costume, Right? Maybe it should do costume number 9 every time you click the spacebar. It should go through costume number 9, 10, 11, 12. It should just go through all the costumes every time you click spacebar. So you can make that happen. You can make that happen. You could just play with the costumes. So for instance, what I can do is back in my script, I can go into looks and I can say, okay, so every time I press spacebar, I'm going to say, every time I press spacebar, oh sorry, let's put this inside the if, right? Let's put this inside the if. I'm going to switch costumes to costume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to switch costume to this one, right? And then after the whole thing is done, after it's going down again, I'll switch costume back to right. Sorry. I'll switch the costume back instead of going after. So okay, so it's while it's going up, when I click the spacebar, I'm switching the costume to a specific one, and then when I'm done, when this whole thing is done, I'm going to switch the costume back to 3, 2, which is I think the one that we have all the time. Okay, let's just check it out. All right, so see, every time I press spacebar, it changes costume just for a little bit. You can't really notice it too much, but it does give it a more polished effect. Right? It does give it a little bit of more polished effect. Some of the other things I want to do with the bird is I want to give it a direction. So for instance, what I want to do is I want to go into my motion and I want to say, okay, so I'm going to say right. So every time I click spacebar, just like as it's changing costume, I also want it to point in a weird direction. Let's say 15 degrees. Let's see how that looks. All right. So it should. So it's pointing downwards, and that's not the direction I want it to go in. I want it to point. Sorry, that's not the direction I want it to go in. I want it to point in the other direction. So I want it to like face up for a little bit, and then I want it to face down again. So let's point. Let's get this one going. So I'm gonna point 20 degrees. Right, 20 degrees counterclockwise, and once that loop is finished, once that loop is absolutely finished, I can just get this one, okay, which is the opposite of that. Or you don't even need that. You could just get this one if you'd like. And you could say, okay, so it's finished doing its thing. Now it's going to go negative 20 degrees. So if you press start, you see what happens is it faces up for a little bit, and then it comes back down. And if you want to make this effect a lot more drastic, what you can do is you can just increase these numbers from 20 to something like 30. Yeah, and I can change this from negative 20 to negative 30. All right, and press start again, and you'll see that it's a little bit more drastic. It depends on your taste, however you like it. All right, so we've come really, really close. All right, but okay, so when the bird dies, I want him to fall a little bit faster. I don't want him to fall so slowly. So what I could do, very simply, what I could do in a very simple way is, okay, if the bird is touching the pipe or is touching the ground, I can just change the value of gravity inside this if statement. All right, so I'm going to take this set out. All right, I'm just going to set, the first thing I do is I set alive. I'm going to set bird alive to false. I'm going to point in the bottom direction. And then I'm going to set the value of gravity. Okay, so normally the value of gravity is negative 3. What I'm going to do when the bird dies, it should fall a lot faster. I'm going to make it twice as fast to negative 6. All right, so now you'll see that the bird is falling at negative 3. All right, but, and here's the big but, here we go. If I hit something, it falls a little bit faster. Right? It falls a little bit faster. So what I want to do is actually negative 6 is not really fast enough. Let's make it faster, like negative 9. Let's make it twice as fast. All right. Let's try it out. Oh, it still doesn't really feel that fast. Maybe we can make something like negative 10, negative 15. Yeah, that's much better. It goes down much faster. All right, that goes down much faster. All right, all right. The other way you could do it, and I'm just doing this because I want to show you the concept of sending messages to each other, is you can go into events, and one of the cool things you can do is you can set this message that says broadcast message, right? This broadcast message. And what this essentially does, this block essentially does, is it sends everyone a message saying, hey, something has happened. And this message, it would have some significance. So you can click on the new message, and you can say, for example, bird died. All right? This message can be anything you want. Just make it meaningful to you. So I'm going to take everything from here out, and I'm going to take this, and all it's going to do if it's touching the bird of the pipe, and I'm going to say, okay, the bird died. And then I'm going to pull out this block right here. So it says, when I receive message. And instead of when I receive message, I want to make sure I select when I receive bird died. That means when this receives the bird has died, then it can do all these different things. It can set bird alive to false, it can point in direction down, and it can change the gravity by a lot more, right? It's not essentially we just achieved the same thing as what we had a little while ago. I just wanted to show everybody the concept of broadcasting messages or sending messages, because it's actually a very important concept, and it's how different sprites can communicate with each other, right? It's how different sprites can communicate with each other. So it's one way that the bird can communicate with, for example, the pipes. All right, there you go. There you go. All right, so we've come a long way. We've come a really long way. All right, we're pretty much done with our game. In the final section of this game, what we're going to do is we're going to add scoring, and we're also going to add high scoring, and we're also going to add the background, just give it some final touches, and I'm going to show you how to make a menu instead of just using what we've been doing right now. I want to show you how to make a menu. All right? Thank you very much. See you in the next lesson.